Hello, everyone, and welcome to WP Roundtable. And I'm Jason Crawford, and I am the lead donkey today.
Hee-haw.
Lead dorky.
I'll dive in next. I am Kellen Mace. I, as of this week, am a web engineer for 10 Up. I'm really excited about it. Happy to be out tonight with a great guest.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Marc Benzakein. I am with ServerPress. We make desktop server, which is really cool. Check it out.
Hi, I'm Kyle. I am a member of the Harlem Globetrotters to talk about WordPress. We've got a great guest for the we've got a really awesome guest today. We've got a lot of questions for. We're going to learn all about Dan Beil, who works at Alley Interactive. He's a developer there, and he's a real smart guy. So, Dan, can you just introduce yourself a little bit? Tell us basically what you do.
Yeah, I am Dan. I'm not a Harlem Globetrotter. I'm a dev. Software. I think I'm technically a software engineer. At Alley Interactive, we're a WordPress VIP development partner. So we work on really big sites that run on WordPress.
That's legit.
And stuff.
Sites, WordPress, that's where it's at.
Right.
What all the cool kids are doing these days.
Well, we try.
But nobody as well as you guys, of course. All right. So before we get to learn more about Dan, which is why everyone is watching this show, we're going to plow through some quick picks of the week. This is where everybody shares something relevant or interesting that they've discovered or uncovered in the last 5 minutes. So what I want to share with everyone is I want to encourage you to run, not walk, to your keyboard in front of you and open up a browser and go directly to annarbor.wordcamp.org/2015 and apply to speak. And if you are completely unable for some reason to speak at this wonderful, amazing event that's coming up, then buy a ticket or perhaps consider sponsoring. All of that is available now. Ann Arbor is going to be the best WordCamp of the year. This, I promise you. All right, who's next?
Okay, I'll go next. Okay, I did not find this in the last 5 minutes. I did not find this in the last couple of weeks, actually. But I was looking for a cheap solution for SSL, and I came across Globe SSL. And for people who are just wanting to be a part of securing the internet and don't really have, an e-commerce platform or something, I think this is a good solution. $5 a year. They've got like a 30-day free trial period for SSL certificates. And so I ran through it today. It was pretty seamless. Actually, I had a lot of problems, but none of them had to do with the SSL certificate. They were all me being stupid. So check it out, Globe SSL. They got a pretty nice deal.
All right, I guess I'll go next. So mine is what I refer to as our marriage saver. It's cozy.com, which is a really nice integrated to-do task list, shopping list, but also more importantly an integrated calendar that syncs up with everything under the sun, including Google Calendar if you want. And I call it my marriage saver because it makes it so that my wife and I do not have conflicts on our calendars most of the time, assuming I look at the calendar. And it's cozy.com, cozi.com.
So why is it better than Google Calendar by itself?
I like the interface a lot better. It's a lot more configurable. You can actually import a lot of different calendaring systems besides just Google Calendar. It's just, I don't know, it's a little bit more robust and a little bit nicer in general.
Cool.
And I've been using it since before Google Calendar even came out. So
yeah. Very nice. I'll dive in next. My pick of the week is one we've mentioned before on the show, but I'll mention it again, and that's my good friend Brian Richards' service, wpsessions.com. I want to mention it again just because I'm continually impressed by the folks he's able to get on there, and the topics presented. He seems to just pick hot button topics that really everyone wants to learn about, who's just getting into WordPress or even wants to level up, so to speak, and get better at it. He's recently launched a program or a new initiative, a new series of courses on taking somebody from a beginner to being quote job ready in a period of 6 months or 9 months or however long it takes them to make it through the coursework and stuff like that, which I think is so cool as somebody who was helped out a lot by online services like this, and learned a lot through self-education and online lessons and stuff like that. So check it out if you haven't already, wpsessions.com.
Dan, do you have something to share?
Yeah, I do. My pick of the week is Nicolas Cage in Fast Times at Ridgemont High, and this is actually a great pick. This is a great pick because I think he's actually credited in that movie as Nicolas Coppola, and he reinvented himself as Nicolas Cage in his career. And I think that as developers, we're kind of reinventing ourselves every day because we're always learning something new and something like that.
Way to make it relevant there, Dan.
Yeah, that's
Thank
brilliant.
you. That's great. So if you did not realize that Nicolas Cage was in Fast Times at Ridgemont High, go back. He is, one second, let me get you what he's credited as. He is credited as Brad's Bud, as Nicolas Coppola via imdb.com. So remember, if Nick Cage can reinvent himself, so can you.
That's amazing. Wow. Probably those are some good picks, you guys. Probably the best we've ever had. I don't think we'll ever top this episode. So I've got a really good feeling about the rest of this episode. Episode 56 of the Roundtable. This is going to be one for the books. I can feel it. All right. So now that we got through our amazing picks and we've introduced our guests, we're going to learn a little bit about it. So Dan, can you kind of take a step back? Do that whole rewind thing, like the little dream sequence, and go back in time to before your career got to where it is today, and just imagine a very young Dan Beil thinking about his future aspirations and trying to decide what to do with his life, and walk us through the path you decided to walk down and how you ended up where you're at today.
Yeah. How much time do we have?
Yeah, we've got a little while.
Okay.
We've got a lot of questions.
Yeah, I know. I see that. None of these are pre-prepared at all, so it's just kind of a free form, clearly.
Here's the fun version.
Yeah, no, I mean, in all honesty, like when you go back to like kind of me in middle school, I really gravitated towards the arts. Like, I like creating things, whether it was painting or photography or pottery or anything like that. And then moving into high school, I started throwing pottery, which is like on the spinning wheel thing, not actually throwing clay at people. And I really enjoyed that. I enjoyed working with my hands. Then I went on to college and then kind of played with some HTML. But early on, I knew I liked creating things. I just didn't exactly know what it was. And so I guess in the beginning, I kind of figured going into the creatives, whether it's art or writing or something like that.
Wow. And then?
How far are we going? I mean, are we going through my entire life until someone paid me to build a website? Is that what we're doing?
Yeah, I want to get up to the website part. So what led you to get into websites? What were you doing professionally before that, and then discovered that stuff?
So the first time I was paid to build a website, I was still in college working on my bachelor's in applied sociology, which of course makes sense.
Perfect.
But I started just playing with HTML, CSS, all of the kind of core things that we know. And someone asked me to build them a site, and I was like, sweet, $300, that's great. Probably took me 3 weeks to do for like a 4-page static HTML site. But I got $300 out of the deal, and it was great. Then I ran across this crazy thing called WordPress. Never looked back. We'll kind of do a time shift. Dropped out of my master's. Somebody else decided to pay me to build a site. So I built it on WordPress, and I was like, this is sweet. And that kind of started my freelance career, which lasted for about 4 or 5 years. So
that's quite a while. So you supported yourself as just a freelance web designer for 4 or 5 years, doing nothing else.
yeah, basically it was. I was working on my master's in applied sociology at the time. Decided I didn't really like where the program was going and the things in academia that I was being exposed to, and it wasn't for me. So I knew how to build sites. I'd made a little bit of money, and I was like, hey, maybe I could make all of my money off of websites. And so that worked out. That worked out really well for a number of years. Then I was presented with an opportunity to go in-house at a brick-and-mortar shop in St. Paul, Minnesota. I'm from Minneapolis, for those that don't know. So we're right side by side to each other. Did that for about 8 months. That position was no longer available to me, and lo and behold, I ended up at LE Interactive. So
awesome.
that's me, like 12 years old to now, in about 5 minutes.
Well, good job with that.
All
So
right.
during those years of freelance, what kind of things were you doing for your clients, and what were these clients like? Where did you get them? What kind of businesses were they? And did you specialize in anything particular, like kind of developing and honing your skill set, making a name for yourself as like the design guy or the back-end dev guy or the this or that, or the guy who builds sites for ice cream shops or something? What did those years look like?
Yeah, the freelancing years are rough. Oh man, that was a dark time in my life. I mean, to be completely honest, until I started making connections, it was like searching Craigslist for the word WordPress, and it was just not good. It was like low-paying, high-expectation, single-owner businesses that needed a website. Like, they needed it. It was something they needed, but neither they or I at the time understood what it really took to create a quality product. So it was like the high hundreds, low $1,000 builds that you get something off ThemeForest, you tweak it, you hack it up, you're not even doing a child theme. That lasted for a year or two. Then I ended up working with another company who is really just kind of a one-man shop, and he was the one to go out and do the sales and all of the billing and all of the business stuff that I really didn't like doing. I don't want to be spending my time being an accountant. So he did all of that. He did the sales, and I was a developer. I mean, I did some design work. We also worked with another freelance designer, and that was about 2 to 3 years of the freelance relationship, or of my freelance career, and it went really, really well. At the tail end of that, as I kept on getting more experience and customizing the admin, doing all of the custom post types and custom relationships between them, I was presented with a in-house to hire position, as I mentioned, at a company called Blue Earth Interactive out of St. Paul, which project-wise was a lot more interesting than what I was doing. Monetarily, personally, was a big jump ahead of where my personal finances were. And I got to work in a team, which was something I never was able to do before. So I learned a lot there.
Awesome.
So, Dan, did you have, while you were at that Blue Earth, I think I met you like right before you got the job there at Blue Earth, and I remembered you were pretty excited about that. What kind of lessons did you learn there, good and bad, that you've taken into your current situation?
I think the best thing I learned at Blue Earth was that, like, when you're working in a team, it doesn't matter who you are, it doesn't matter how long you've been developing, doesn't matter how long you've been designing. Like, every project is going to bring some novel challenge, something nobody on the team has done before. And you have to figure out, like, who's the best to figure this new novel task out. Is it a new type of information architecture? Is it a new technology that we haven't interacted with before? Is it new design requirements that nobody ever considered before? And those are the type of things that are really, really difficult to conquer on your own as a freelancer. But when you're working in a group or a team of, I don't know, four or five people, Blue Earth at the time I think was about a total of 15 to 20. Clearly not everybody's working on the same project at the same time. So like being able to lean on people's strong points when you're in a team was probably the biggest thing that I learned. At the same time, the scariest thing I learned was even the best devs don't know everything. They're just really good at figuring it out quickly.
And what would you say was your biggest or most novelist of a challenge that you had when you were there? And novelist isn't the word. I am very well aware of that. But
right. What was the new new thing that I walked into? They brought me in as the quote-unquote WordPress expert. I still don't consider myself an expert, but they brought me in as the WordPress expert for a site that was about 1,800 hours into development at the time. And they were 1,800 hours in, and they were like, it was just, we need a WordPress expert. So walking into a situation like that, looking at the assumptions that vanilla PHP developers made about WordPress was something that completely blew my mind, because I learned PHP through WordPress, not the other way around. I'm still learning a lot about vanilla PHP. So to come from it from the other side was a really interesting path to take.
Hey Dan, so I've heard you talk about a couple of interesting projects in your past. You want to tell us your number one horror story?
Well, the build I was just talking about was interesting, to say the least. I don't have any like actual complete horror story builds. I mean, I've had builds that don't hit deadlines, that go far beyond deadlines, and everything that I think every developer has worked with. But when you take a step back and look at it, it happens. It is what it is. But I will say that like some of the most demanding clients I've ever worked with were some of the lowest budget projects I ever have worked with. It's the $3,000, $4,000, $5,000 WordPress builds where you're trying to squeeze every penny out of, or the client's trying to squeeze every penny out of what they're paying, and it's really hard when you're 80% of a way through the build to say no, because you want to push this thing across the finish line.
Cool. Dan, I'll dive in next here. We're going to get into Alley Interactive now. We're first wondering, how did you make that transition from the freelance life and then doing one or two other gigs to finally getting hooked up with Alley? How did that happen?
That's kind of a funny story. So I was actually laid off from my previous position for lack of work. Lack of availability, and so I took a day off for various reasons, and this is about a week before my birthday, so that was pretty cool. Took a day off, and then I woke up on a Thursday morning at 9 a.m. and I'm like, okay, what am I going to do? Like, am I going to go back into freelancing? I could probably fill my calendar up in 2 weeks, or I really like the in-house experience. Maybe I should stay with that. And so I tweeted out, wow, I haven't worked on my resume in forever. Send. And 9 minutes later, I remember this very clearly, someone named Nicole Arnold tweeted back, hold off on that, we need to talk. she was and still currently is a developer with Alley Interactive, and over the next 2 weeks I interviewed with 3 or 4 different development companies, and I felt that Alley was a great fit, and ended up with them.
Wow.
Very cool. Very cool. So when you ended up with them, then what were you doing at first? What was your role then, and how has it changed since you've been there?
Sure. So I was hired as a software engineer or software developer. I don't know what it says on the site off the top of my head. To basically be a WordPress theme dev, which doesn't really have much of a definition. I'm doing a lot of back-end work, there's a bunch of front-end work, and that's still what I'm doing. But I think over the past 12 to, well, it's a little over a year at this point, I've been able to use and learn the tools that we use internally to kind of help and guide some of the new hires to making that transition easier. And so that's something that I kind of pride myself on, because it's a hard jump. Like, it doesn't matter how good of a developer you are. If you've never had to query 200,000 posts, you're not going to do it correctly the first time. And I mean, you know that, right? You can be great, but if you've never worked with WordPress at scale, there's so many more things to consider.
Right.
So I think that's
yeah.
my title certainly hasn't changed, but I like to think that unofficially I can reach out, or new hires could reach out to me and ask questions. So.
Yeah. Oh, that's cool. That's something I've noticed too, going from the freelance world to working at 10up and trying to read through and put into practice some of their the engineering best practices that they open sourced about half a year or so ago. And one of the things that stuck out to me the first time I read it months ago is when you're doing a WP query or Git post or whatever else, never use the -1, for the maximum number of posts, for the same reason that you said, right? They deal with these enterprise clients where if you pull every single post and you have 500,000 posts or whatever, they'll crash the site. That simple, So they say always pick some kind of upper bound, right? Even if it's a big one. So stuff like that.
Yeah, definitely.
Really quick, right? I'm interested to hear how Alley is structured. I think in the back chat and in our pre-show prep document and stuff like that, you said Alley doesn't have a specific dev team, right?
So,
how are the teams arranged?
Yeah. So this is interesting. So I was employee. We were trying to figure this out at Loop. I think I'm in the low 20s. I think I'm below 25, and I was hired April 1st, 2014. We're currently at about 37. So we've had some pretty good growth over the last year. And that's caused some. I mean, that's a lot of people, right? Like, you have to figure out what to do, and so instead of breaking into groups that always work on the same project, we've broken into mentorship groups where people on the leadership team at Alley are kind of responsible for a couple of people, quote unquote, underneath them to help mentor them and teach them back if they're whatever particular thing that they're struggling with. Maybe it's regex. Maybe they have some crazy regex things they have to do that they can go and talk to their mentor about that. And they're also primarily responsible for making sure that our code reviews are clear and things like that. But of 5 different projects that I'm on, I have 5, basically 5 different teams. Some of the people are intermingled on them. So it's an interesting setup. We kind of pride ourselves on being a flat company where I can code review any one of our partners' work. Our partners, still do some production code, not a lot, but they will. Or, my mentor's work, I can code review it and stop it from going live if I feel that something's wrong.
Yeah. So Ellie, at this point, heavy on the services side as well. I'm wondering about product offerings. I remember there was Ellie Interactive was involved in an Elasticsearch implementation in WordPress, right? What's that called again?
SearchPress.
Yeah, SearchPress. Is that going to be a commercial product? Like right now, I don't see it on the site. I don't know, is that being like sold anywhere?
To my knowledge, it's open source.
Is it open source? I wasn't sure. Okay.
I can check. Well, we can check right now. I think it is. That's a great question for someone that you're going to have on in a couple of weeks, which would be Matt Foynes. He wrote the vast majority of it.
Sure, yeah.
I'm not intimately familiar with SearchPress or its licensing, so I don't want to get too much into that. But when I've seen it in action, it is awesome. I will tell you that.
Yeah, that's cool. Cool. All right, who's next?
So Dan, then what does the workflow look like for you if you kind of don't have a structure? Do you have like a project manager or anything like that, or how does that all work? I'm kind of curious.
Yeah. So what happens is, for instance, right now I'm on a number of different projects. Most of those projects have the same project manager. Two of them, off the top of my head, have a different project manager. And so they can kind of prioritize my time to figure out what I should be working on in any given day. Which is interesting, and it can be challenging, definitely, but I don't necessarily have like a lead project manager that I report to. Like that's not really how we're structured. If that answers your question, or just creates more questions, I'm not sure.
In a way, it creates more questions, but I'm just kind of, I mean, clearly someone has to oversee everything at some point in time, but or is it just a bunch of checks and balances where it's more like a peer review kind of thing is almost what it sounds like.
Yeah, so what happens is, on a code review standpoint, I also just got told that SearchPress is open source. You can find it on github.com/allyinteractive/searchpress.
Awesome, thanks.
Thank you, Tom. Sorry, he just chatted at me. So from a structural standpoint and a code review standpoint, if you're employed to work on the platform that said project is in, you have a clear go to code review said code review. So I'm not going to code review Drupal stuff. Like we have some Drupal projects. I'm not going to code review it. I don't know best practices for Drupal. But anyone that's employed, whether you're on the project or not, for WordPress stuff, you can code review that. Which actually is really enlightening in cases, because they might just be looking at 10 lines of code that have changed. But because they're not familiar with the project, they might be asking questions about the logic of why you're doing something. And then you go and explain it to them, and then you have a conversation. Maybe this isn't the best way to do it. Maybe we can go back and do it differently. Or maybe they hadn't thought of doing it the way that I did it, or back and forth. I think there's a lot of great reasons to have a outside observer do code review. On the project management standpoint, like I said, it can be challenging because you have multiple clients across multiple PMs and finding out whose priorities and things like that. It can be a challenge, but it works.
Dan, can you get a little, or go into some specifics and talk just a little bit about when maybe you do code reviews, or you said mentoring new hires and stuff like that, and explain a little bit maybe like what your experiences have been regarding like what you encounter in those reviews, and maybe the mistakes or opportunities for improvement maybe that you commonly see, especially for beginners. You talked about like people not used to working at scale, and there's maybe a lot of common issues that you encounter for that. What are a lot of like things that you see, red flags that you look for, low-hanging fruit that you see to improve? every time. Go ahead and feel free to dive deep in that.
Yeah, definitely. And let me go on the record that I try to completely unofficially mentor, not mentor. I unofficially make myself available to new hires, especially the ones that I introduce to the company. It's in no way part of my actual job. But when someone comes on, I like to say, hey, if you have any questions, feel free to reach out. Something like that. When it comes to code reviews, I remember my first code review, and it was horrible. It was like spacing every parenthesis, not doing my variables correctly, just bad formatting. Like the knowledge was there, but the cleanliness was not. So I think I got whipped into shape pretty good. It's like someone posts WordPress code on Facebook, and I'm looking at the screenshot, and I'm like, you're not spacing your parentheses. But at the same time, one of the big things when you start working at scale or when you join a team for the first time, you have to use a different Git workflow. So we use a feature branch workflow, which means we always branch off of our master, do some work, go back into master, and then push that live. Rather than branching off a master for dev A and branching off the master for dev B, they're both working on like a billion different separate things and then trying to go back in at the same time. So adapting to a feature branch workflow can be a struggle for some people. But it usually clears up. I mean, I from the people that I've explained it to, it's been great. Like it's a 10-minute conversation of why it's awesome and why it works. And sometimes it's just the tools. I mean, when you're dealing on a VIP site, when you have both a .git and a .svn sitting in the same thing,
Yeah.
it's kind of, there we go. I mean, it's confusing. So
Right.
a lot of it is workflow based. In all honesty.
Yeah.
Yeah. Workflow based and coding standards, which are all publicly available.
Yeah.
All right, and I got a question for you. I know you've talked a lot about client-first development, and that's been something you've spoken about within the WordCamps and WordPress community. Without going into too much detail, would you give us like a real quick rundown on how you apply that to your work and how you try to focus that within the sites that you develop?
Yeah, definitely. Like what I consider client-first development is always thinking of the end use case for what you're building. Like you might build something crazy and cool, and use all of these background hidden custom post types that do stuff and all of these things, but if it's not easy for the client to interact with, they don't care. Like it might work perfectly if you do things step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4. But that's not how the client is going to do things. They're going to do step 1, step 3, step 4, step 2. And so if you think in a way, and if you prepare for the client to do and interact with their site how they might, that's kind of what I mean about client-first development. And so what I'm thinking of when I'm working is either progressive disclosure, which is a term that I'm stealing directly from Michelle, and she's probably stealing directly from somebody else. Yep. Okay, she's stealing it from somebody else. Where you might guide the user or your client through a set of choices versus spitting out all of the information at the same time. Maybe they're setting up a complicated landing page or something like that. I think does that answer the question? Does that address the question?
Yeah, I just want to know how you go about implementing that, and if that's how you're thinking about it. I don't know if there's anything more to say.
Yeah, well, I mean, the thing is that, you know, client says, okay, I need to build this complicated landing page. The first thing that goes through my mind is, okay, when they're building this page, what do they need to see first? You know, it's like, what do they need to see first? What is the most basic choice they need to make to build said landing page? And then what's the choice after that? And then what's the choice after that? Rather than, as a developer, just spitting out 50 meta fields on the same page, which may or may not make sense for them to fill out. So.
Hey Dan, so let's move on a little bit into the the WordPress community. How did you get involved with that, and what did the evolution look like for you with your experience within the community?
Well, it happened fast. This would have been December 2012. I gave a talk at my second ever WordPress meetup on doing a paid membership site in BuddyPress. And Kiko Doran happened to be in the audience, who was in the process of organizing WordCamp Minneapolis 2013, if I have my years correct, and he was like, Dan, this is great. We're doing a buddy camp. You need to come and give this talk. I'm like, I have no idea what a WordCamp is, but this thing's in a couple of months, so sweet, I'll be ready for it. So I ended up giving the same or similar talk at WordCamp Minneapolis that time, and I got hooked. Like, I loved it. Like, just being around all of these smart people and doing everything. Like, I remember I met J-Trips at my first WordCamp, and I didn't even have any imposter syndrome because I had no idea who he was. Like, I didn't even care. I'm like, I don't know who you are. Hi, it's nice to meet you. I'm Dan. And that's really how it all got started.
All right, Dan. I'll dive in next here. So for the community, you mentioned attending WordCamps and getting plugged in there. Do you have a favorite WordCamp story? You mentioned the J-Trip one, kind of meeting him for the first time, but anything else that sticks out, like favorite presentations or networking with somebody that you really appreciate now that it happened?
Yeah, I mean, I think the networking is great across all boards. I've kind of gotten to the point personally where I don't, in the best way possible, I don't care who you are. Like, if you're a huge name in the community, I'll hey, I'm Dan, nice to meet you, I like your work. But one of my favorite presentations was Pippin's from WordCamp Phoenix 2014, if that's correct. And one of the reasons that I loved his presentation was it was about when things go wrong in a really large way, because it happens to all of us. And to have someone like Pippin openly talk about when things go really, really, really bad and how he fixed them, and how he fixed them not only behind the scenes but also from a PR standpoint, was a really interesting thing to hear. There's got to be a video of that somewhere. At least I hope there is. It was a wonderful talk.
Yeah. Very cool. Have you been a speaker in the past at any camps?
Yeah, I could rattle off 5 or 6 probably.
Mm-hmm. Oh, it's alright. You don't have to name them all for us. But,
okay.
When you speak, are they like development-centric talks, and how would you prepare for those generally? You say?
If I do a developer talk, it's actually a little bit easier for me because I typically live code them, which most people are completely afraid of doing, but I really don't care. I got stuck. Mark, were you working with Brad and Dusty at the last WordCamp, Milwaukee?
In Milwaukee, yeah, I was, yeah.
Yeah, so Dusty Filippini was working on organizing. I'm going to call him out. I don't care. He was working with organizing WordCamp Milwaukee last year, and the idea was for Brad Parbs to do an intro to custom post types. I was going to do an intro to custom meta fields, and Dusty was going to do an intro to something else after that. Brad Parbs ran a little bit short, so he called me up real quick, and then I learned that Dusty wasn't going to show up at all because he had to do organizer duties. So I live coded for about 2 hours.
Wow.
So that was a thing. I gave one talk, I think it was actually at Milwaukee, on dealing with working at home and how you kind of can get a disconnect from reality. That one I don't think went so well, so I might stick to developer talks in the future. But I like live coding. I think it goes great because when something goes wrong, you can say, "Okay, audience, what's wrong with this code?" Like, I don't need to fix it myself. Let's have the however many people in the audience code review it. Who can spit out the right answer first?
So, Dan, outside of work, what kind of things do you do for fun?
I have 2 huskies that I try to keep entertained, which is pretty difficult.
And those are rescues, aren't they?
Yeah, they are. They are both rescues. Fun is kind of a relative term to me. I am a first-time homeowner for about 15 months now.
Wow.
And I'm learning. Yeah, it's great. You buy a house and you move your bed in, and you're like, "This is wonderful." My house was built in 1920. And I've learned just how much money you can keep dumping into an old house.
Let's go through.
I have no idea what you're talking about, man.
Right, Mark?
Yeah.
So my house is much smaller than Mark's, but it's fun is a balance of video games and fixing the house and going out and eating. Not much into the sports or whatnot, but that is, yes. If I'm not coding, I'm with my dogs, working on my house, or sitting on my couch playing video games.
What's your favorite video game?
The Last of Us, probably hands down. Like, it is gorgeous storytelling, gorgeous graphics. You will be a grown man and cry in the first 10 minutes of that game. I guarantee you.
So it's like the Up of video games.
It's
Wow.
Naughty. If anyone from Naughty Dog happens to be watching, which I'm guessing they're not, congrats. That was a epic masterpiece.
All right. Do you have any side projects?
Not really. I have 2 plugins in the repo that I need to work on. One of them is Image Replace, which takes any image that is served by a vPost thumbnail and replaces it by images of your choosing, which would be Star Trek or Futurama at this point. Which is actually really helpful when you don't want to download 700,000 media objects in a local environment, because they're all going to come back broken. Right? Like, I don't want 700,000 images on my computer for 5 different projects. It just doesn't make sense. The other project, my other GitHub project, is Developer Fuel, which, depending on the time of day, will tell you by your geographic location where either the closest coffee shop or the closest bar is in a dashboard widget. So as a developer on the go, you can always get what you need.
Love it.
Those are my side projects. They haven't gotten any love in a while, but.
So one of us who's not busy asking questions should be dropping links to those in the show notes. So here's a question for you. Just fill in the blank here. My job is really great and all. I love it, but I really just wish someone would pay me to do blank.
Probably fostered huskies.
Nice.
Like I fostered 4 before I adopted my second, and they are, I mean, they're really a pain in the ass. Like they really are. They're very opinionated dogs, but they're gorgeous and deserve a good home, and I liked doing it. If I had a bigger house, I'd probably still foster, but I don't.
You should finish your attic up for foster dogs.
Yeah, that or the basement.
Build out your attic or a basement, yeah.
Either or.
Attic. Jeez. Awesome. So, do you? This is like just a random question, going way back out of order here, but Allie does Drupal projects. Do you ever get involved in those?
Well, I'm going to be working on a Drupal to WordPress migration tomorrow. That's about as close as I get to Drupal these days.
Okay.
I touched one Drupal site when I was freelancing. Clearly, it's come a long way in the last 6 years. But no, I don't do any active production Drupal work.
Well, WordPress has come a long way in those years as well.
Yes, it has.
Yeah. So, if you do you have any cool plugin recommendations that we should check out, maybe that we haven't heard of?
Yeah, I'm actually all pimp 2 right now. I'll start with the one that isn't ours, and that would be CMB2, which is currently maintained and used by Web Dev Studios, which is a meta field manager. The second is Field Manager, both of which are open source and found on GitHub. Field Manager is created and maintained by LA Interactive, which is, when I started, day one, whoever was guiding me through getting onboarded was like, hey, you need to learn Field Manager. It makes meta boxes for you. I'm like, well, I can just hand code a meta box. I don't care about that. And then going into my first real build, which was day 3 for me at Alley, I realized how powerful Field Manager actually is. It's insane how fast you can do really, really complicated meta structures with it. And the only reason I say that is I'm not as familiar with CMB2. And that's one of the things that I really like talking about is complicated metadata structures, which is why I bring up those plugins.
Right. That does sound really cool. So is that a lot of the kind of projects that you get involved in? Is just the complex metadata stuff?
Yeah, like just crazy, ridiculous metadata relationships between custom post types that have no actual relationship or hierarchy between them.
Right.
So that's a lot of the work that I'll end up doing, or that I'll be involved in, at least.
Right. So you're that guy. So when that project comes in, they say, "Oh, this is a Dan project."
Well, we have plenty of developers that are much smarter than I am. At least I'll say that. I don't know. Every day I log into Slack and I look at our WordPress channel and my mind is blown. But that's the great thing about working in a team. It's not just myself. It's 37-ish minds that all have a unique, take on something that can contribute to it.
So what's on your calendar, Dan? Where are people going to bump into you this year? Do you attend meetups, WordPress events, WordCamps? What are you thinking?
I don't do meetups in Minneapolis too much anymore, but I will be in Miami in, what is that, 2 weeks?
Yep.
Something like that? Okay. I'll be in Miami. If you happen to be in New York a week or two after that, I'll be in New York for our company meetup. After that, nothing is officially on the calendar, but I hear that Milwaukee and Omaha will be happening.
Milwaukee is July 24th through 26th. It is actually. It's
But
on.
are your speaker submissions open?
No, we're still working on the website.
Can I
But go ahead and submit anyway.
Okay, so I'll be submitting to Milwaukee. I'll be submitting to Omaha. After that, I'm not sure what's happening.
Cool.
So that should get us through a couple of months, right?
Yeah, that'll get you through a couple of months. There's plenty of other good stuff throughout the rest of the year that we hope we'll bump into each other at.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I certainly hope so. What is your favorite WordPress function?
Probably WP list pluck.
Ooh. Nice.
Because it gets you out of jams when you don't know how to like you got an array back from some ridiculous API or something like that, and you're like you ran new query, you already have it, blah blah. WP list pluck gets you out of a lot.
That's nice. Way to come up with one that probably a lot of people don't even know is there. That's sweet. So, do you have any great recommendations for folks who we should invite to be on the show in the future as a guest?
Yeah. Oh man, I was gonna say Boynes, but you're already gonna have him.
Yeah.
God, I had something for this. I'm sorry for whoever I actually remember saying. Yeah, no, it was great. Have you had Kiko or Josh on from Prestige yet?
We haven't had Josh. Kiko, we had for sure.
Yeah, no, I think Josh would be a great chat about Prestige as well as the place of high-end JavaScript within WordPress.
Right. Yeah.
Josh Broden's a great guy and super smart. So get him, Josh, if you're listening.
Yeah. Josh is listening. Right. Well, he'll hear from me at some point because I want to get him on the show for sure.
Oh yeah.
Awesome. So, is there anything else that maybe we didn't get to talk about, or that maybe you'd like to just share or promote or reveal or anything before we wrap up? Because we're near that point.
Let me look real quick. I have 30 seconds. Who inspires me? Oh, that looks inspiring.
Yeah.
I love meeting the people on Twitter that I've never met before in real life. And that inspires me in a way of realizing that people that I might idolize are still people too. At LukeConf, I was able to meet Norcross for the first time. Somehow, we've been at the same conferences probably multiple times over the past 12 months, but we just never bumped into each other. So no one's specific, but meeting those people that you interact with on Twitter and meeting them for the first time, shaking their hand, hanging out, just hearing other people's stories is something that just kind of inspires me, if that makes sense.
Ah, definitely.
Yeah.
That's what I love going to camps for that.
Yeah.
That very reason. All those people that I've only known as avatars for so long helped me out with various things or wrote articles that inspired me or just did so much to bump into in person and get to know them. It's awesome. It's awesome. And you're at Action Dan, and there are people out there who can't wait to go to WordCamp and meet you for the first time. So.
Oh, I don't know about that.
Yeah. So we want to thank you, Dan, for being on the show and for answering all these ridiculous questions and letting the world get to know you a little bit better. So thanks a lot for joining us.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks for coming on.
Thanks a lot, Dan.
Thank you.